Welcome back, hosers. Today I have a couple of goals. I've got my seedlings sitting out. I didn't have time throughout the week to do any good hardening off. The komatsuna, mibuna, and tatsoi that I planted earlier has been munched on a bit by the grasshoppers. But one of today's tasks is we're going to put netting over this bed, and that will protect them from further depredation from grasshoppers. Another task I want to complete today is I'm going to build a trellis for the peas that I've started. And then tomorrow I'm going to continue this video. So if you see a clothing change, that's why. And we're going to actually plant out the seedlings. It's not a very long hardening off period, but I'm hoping that I'm going to be able to leave them sitting out longer today because it is delightfully overcast. Also, we need to pick some kohlrabi. So let's start with that. I'm excited. I'm getting my first kohlrabi of the season. If we twist it out of the soil, I'm going to get a little bit of the roots as well. And I'll just snap it off here at the base. And here I have my kohlrabi picked in my hand. Now, the leaves that have not been damaged too much by grasshoppers can actually come in and become food as well. To prepare your leaves for storage, if you're not ready to eat them right away, what we like to do is we will blanch them in some boiling water and then freeze them. And they are a really good addition to, well, anything that would use baked greens. So here is my picked kohlrabi, a bit bigger than a golf ball. Rule of thumb is we want golf ball size. This one right here is probably a better size. Now, also, there are exceptions to the golf ball rule. If you are growing in a cool season, then they're going to tend to stay tender longer, and you are going to get kohlrabi that get up to about softball size and still not even need to be peeled necessarily. And that can be really lovely. I'm going to be building my pea trellis from sticks that I've collected. So I'm just going to start pushing some sticks into the ground. And I need something to tie this with. My favorite things to tie things with for the semi-long term are either going to be wire or twine. And if I use a twine, I like to make sure that it is a plant-based twine just because that way when I'm done with it, sometimes I can even throw it in my compost pile. It's absolutely not necessary to spend a bunch of time building a trellis. In my old garden, I used a modular fence section from the big box store and it worked great. I'm just doing this year because sticks and leftover wires are free. Almost anything can be a pea trellis, and the more creative you are, the happier you'll be. The sticks protrude out into my walkway, which is not super convenient. So I'm going to come back here with some clippers and clip those off real quick. Much better. So now I've got a pea trellis built and ready for planting peas tomorrow. Well, it's the next day, and I thought I'd start by planting out some peas. You can put peas pretty close together, so I'm going to just dig a little trench that's deep enough to put soil blocks into. And then we'll backfill around them once they're all in. Sugar snap peas have a typical time to harvest of 6 to 8 weeks. I planted mine just 8 weeks before my average first frost. I'm not very worried about losing them to frost because peas are frost hardy, and a few light frosts should just result in sweeter peas. Okay, that's the peas done. I might drop a couple more pea seeds here and maybe a few down the center just to increase my yield. Now, when applying netting to your garden bed, there are a couple of different ways you can do it, and they offer different amounts of benefit and different protection from different hazards in the garden. I am going to do an unsupported netting because right now my primary concern is just that grasshoppers are eating my brassicas. and I'm not really worried about a lot else right now. So I'm just going to lay my netting loosely over the bed and weight down the edges so that it's difficult for the grasshoppers to get up under them. And that will protect my beds from grasshoppers. However, it will not protect my beds from hard rain or hail, and it will not protect my beds from critters flying up and laying eggs directly on the leaves through the netting, and then those eggs hatching and the caterpillars eating my crops. So that's something to keep in mind. If you don't support your netting, you're not protected from weather or egg-laying pests. Now, if I had put wire or PVC, some sort of arches here, and then draped the netting over it, that would, in addition to protecting me from the grasshoppers, also protect me from hail, because it's going to slow those hailstones down and possibly bounce them off entirely. And it will also protect me from egg-laying creatures laying their eggs on the leaves of my brassicas, as long as the leaves of my brassicas are not pressing up against the sides of the netting. So I would have a increased amount of protection if I did a floating row cover, but I'm just right now going to go for instant gratification. So keep that in mind if you decide to emulate me. This is better than nothing, but it's not the best way to do netting. Now, if you lay your netting just directly on top of your plants, the concern might be, well, is it going to block or stunt the growth of the plants underneath by weighing them down? And if you just had like 1 or 2 plants under this whole thing, the answer would be absolutely. But since we're doing a bed of plants, then that's not as great a concern, because collectively they're quite strong. Check this out. Got some dog vomit slime mold growing in my blocks that I've potted up to transplant somewhere else. If you get slime mold in a potted plant that you've had outside, I can imagine it's really easy to panic because it looks absolutely terrible. But it's important to know that slime mold is not going to hurt your plants. It is just feeding on microorganisms on top of the soil. And as soon as it runs out of food and finishes making babies, it's just going to disappear on its own. And I'm going to do a quick inspection just to make sure that there are definitely no grasshoppers trapped under the netting with my plants. Because if you do trap pests in with your plants, the netting stops being protection for your plants and becomes protection for your pests. It's a bit of a double-edged sword. So probably in a little bit, I'm going to come back and check on this. And I have enough netting left over. This is a larger sheet that I cut in half that I'll be able to put netting over that bed tomorrow as I transplant out my seedlings. And half of this bed and that bed should be sufficient to ward off grasshoppers. And I'm not so worried about putting netting over my peas because the trellis is too tall. And if they're growing well enough to actually get a harvest out of them, they will grow fast enough to shrug off grasshopper damage, theoretically. So I feel pretty comfortable that we are ready for tomorrow. I'm going to take my kohlrabi in and process it and get it ready for storage and eating. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Now, ordinarily, I would be trying to find a way to interplant things a little bit more so that I had more variety of species planted together. But aside from the mache, everything that's going in this bed is a brassica. And instead of relying on confusion to keep the predators away from my plants, I'm relying on insect netting. So it should work out okay, I hope. I really love how much less transplant shock I've seen since I switched to soil blocks from starting in pots. I think that even if I weren't using less plastic, which is also a win, the reduced transplant shock would be worth it. There are some aspects of starting seeds in soil blocks that I'm still adjusting to, but to see benefit from it right away like this is really nice. It's taken me a while to edit this footage down into a watchable video, and in the days since transplanting out, I'm happy to report that everything appears to be growing well. The komatsuna is almost 4 inches tall, and there's no visible difference between direct sown and the transplanted crops. Homegrown lettuce has been a treat in my garden for years, but I'm really looking forward to the variety of flavors and textures that I'm going to get with these new additions to the garden. I also look forward to seeing which of these crops is the most and least frost hardy, and being able to report back to you with that information. I'm considering setting up hoops on at least one of the beds so that I can use some horticultural fleece I brought from my old garden to extend my season. With a simple frost blanket, it's possible to harvest fresh salad for Thanksgiving, even in many colder parts of North America. I know this because I made a point of flexing with some garden fresh greens when we hosted Thanksgiving at the old house. As with the peas, all of these brassicas are frost hardy and will readily survive a few frosts with improved flavor and texture. Now it is so lovely that I have a garden with something in every bed and a fall harvest to look forward to. I'm also really looking forward to the amazing spring that I'm going to have with this garden, since I didn't get to have that this year, since I was still building it. I just want to thank you for joining me in my garden today. I hope you have a wonderful time in your own.